Breakthroughs advancing the introduction of autonomous vehicles and driverless cars are soon expected to become a commercial reality. And at the same time, millennials, along with urbanites, are gravitating towards a model of personal mobility consumption based on pay per use, which fundamentally changes today's consumption model centered on one of personal ownership of cars. A system that has been well established for a century is on the verge of a major transformation that could result in the emergence of a new ecosystem of personal mobility. To help us sort through the impacts of the mobility technology revolution in China, please join me in welcoming Davis Wang from Mobike and Zaid from Getaround.
Hey, Clay. Nice to see you again.
It's you. Well, I'm delighted to be able to lead this panel discussion. As some of you may know, Davis was our guest at Brainstorm Tech in Aspen this July, and he and I had a conversation there about Mobike and what it has achieved. Those of you who are visiting China for the first time have probably already noticed some of the examples of Mobike's success. The streets of the city of Guangzhou around us. It's a little bit confusing in that Mobikes are orange. That's not the Alibaba-related bike provider is the other color, yellow, not the Alibaba orange, but these guys are orange. And they've really just grown with astonishing speed. Some of the numbers that we rehearsed and discussed in the summer were that in the United States last year, the Bike Sharing Association for all the cities in the United States, even though the US has been doing bike sharing since really the mid-90s, they were bragging about having 30 million rides on bikes shared in all US cities for the entire year. Davis, tell me how many rides you do in a day.
Oh, right now it's slightly behind the number of 30 million because right now the winter's coming.
Winter's coming, oh, so you're down a little bit.
Yeah.
So you're clocking in a single day what every city in America does in bike sharing, just in a 24-hour period. Give us some of the other metrics that are kind of amazing about where you are in terms of number of users and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think the mission of Mobike is trying to serve the needs of the last kilometers challenge for all the big cities worldwide. So last time when we met, we just started the global expansion. And right now, we are in 12 countries already, including China. And total number of cities worldwide, we have achieved 200.
200?
Yeah, so since we met last time, we added new cities, including Rotterdam from Holland, Berlin from Germany, and Turin from Italy, Washington, D.C., Sydney, et cetera, et cetera. So we are trying to provide connected bikes, trying to provide these convenient services to the people who live in the big cities worldwide to help on the air pollution and also to solve a little bit the traffic congestion.
That's an extraordinary rollout just in a very short space of time. Where do you expect to be by, say, the middle of next year? Have you got a plan for how many overseas cities you push into further?
So we announced a World Cycling Day back to September 17th by working together with United Nations, which means we are trying to persuade more people from all the countries worldwide to ride a bicycle. And I'm hoping to have, let's say, 500 million people to ride bicycle. And right now, we have already 200 million. So which means we are going to persuade another 300 million people to ride a bicycle in the coming 6-7 months.
Wow, that's extraordinary. And of course, fueling this expansion is some pretty serious sums of venture capital money. Both you and your main competitor have raised about $1 billion.
Money is important.
Money's
the
important.
Vision is even more important.
True. All right. Well, I want to hear about your vision, but let's turn next to Sam. Now, Sam, I told you that I was going to give Davis bragging rights first and see if you could top that. why don't you run us through your metrics a little bit and what your business model does. How many people here are familiar with Getaround? I love the name of this company, by the way, because it is exactly what we're talking about, how people get around and how that's changing. Your idea is to, it's not Uber-like, it's slightly different. Explain to us how it's different.
Yeah, sure. It's essentially a consumer-to-consumer marketplace.
Right.
And we enable everyday people to rent their cars out. So you can rent somebody else's car, and we make the process very seamless. So you just download our app, you put in your driver license, credit card, and you can instantly rent someone else's car, locate the car, unlock the doors, do everything from the phone, and go. And so
that's the driver, the user of the car.
That's right. That's the renter who ends up being the driver of the vehicle. Correct.
Yeah. Right.
And that's the idea. And we provide insurance with every trip. So all parties are covered for comprehensive collision and liability coverage. And I guess a little bit of background on the company. We've started a number of years ago, actually, probably well before Mobike. Originally launched in 2011, and then really launched our hardware-enabled model in 2014. Very focused on the San Francisco market and sort of convincing consumers that renting out their $30,000 asset was a good idea, and managed to become by far the largest car sharing provider in the San Francisco Bay Area, and then have since expanded to 14 cities across the United States in the past 18 months. We're adding another 24 cities in the coming 24 months. And I don't know, in terms of metrics, I think last year had about just shy of 10 million hours booked through our platform.
That's still a pretty rapid expansion. And tell us a little bit about your investors as well, because you have some serious players that have joined with you.
Yeah, we have some, so we have a spectrum of investors. We have, our institutional money in terms of venture capital, our main investor is Menlo Ventures, who are, probably most people know them. I mean, they have a long history in Silicon Valley, but most people know them because they backed Uber very early on.
Right.
And then we have a number of other Silicon Valley venture capitalists and investors in the company. And we also, on the other hand, have a large number of automotive ecosystem players who have participated in various capacities. From Cox Automotive, who run Manheim as one of the largest wholesalers of vehicles or auction houses of vehicles, through to people like Toyota and even Shanghai Auto.
So in my opening remarks, I just sort of mentioned this shift towards the world that anybody that's used to sort of driving before maybe say 3 to 5 years ago knows, which is that you own a car. Or you borrow your dad's car or whatever it is, but this notion of ride sharing or car sharing was a pretty alien one, and now the technology enables us to be right on the cusp of this complete paradigm shift for that. And I'm just struck. You seem to be pursuing it at compared to Mobike's pace at fairly deliberate speed. If you had more venture capital, would you roll out globally with as much speed as Mobike would?
I mean, if we had an infinite amount of venture capital, we could just buy all the cars and put them on the thing, but cars tend to be pretty expensive. Yeah. So there's probably, certainly more capital would allow us to operate more markets in parallel. And so in that sense, yes, it would grow faster in terms of more geographic expansion. I think there's only so much venture capital you can put into like the user adoption, especially of people getting comfortable with the idea of renting out their vehicles. And that's something we've just seen that, you have the trailblazers who come in early, but once they have a good experience, then it sort of gets more mainstreamed and people are convinced they should do it. But there's a healthy degree of skepticism early on because it's just a totally new behavior. That's not really true on the demand side. On people want to rent cars, and like if you put the car there, people find it and rent it right away. But you've got to build a lot of process and systems to get the car owners listing their vehicles. So certainly definitely venture capital would accelerate things. There's no question, and that is something we're considering. But in a marketplace, you always have both sides. And if you just push one side too fast over another, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And I just did a quick calculation. So because one bicycle is roughly cost $100 to $150, but a car is going to cost you $15,000 at least.
Right.
At least.
So which means Sam is going to need $100 billion to roll out globally.
Wow.
Yeah. That's a lot of capital. Yeah. For buying the cars. Thankfully, there's a lot of, certainly in the United States, you find that we have way too many cars. I think the numbers it's something like 800 cars per 1,000 people. So, we're vastly oversupplied in vehicles.
Yeah.
I think the situation in China maybe is a little bit different.
So, Davis, talk to me a little bit about what you've learned from your overseas expansion experience, because this is really the last 6 to 9 months or so has really been your first kind of wave of expansion. Are there things that have been challenging?
Yeah, I think because we are trying to build a kind of the so-called new mobility, which means we are right now in some of the Chinese cities. Right now we got tens of thousands bikes.
Yeah.
And Mobike is becoming one of the major public transportations.
Right.
Just right after subway or bus.
Right.
So which means Mobike is becoming one of the infrastructures.
Right.
And that's why, because we are offering a public-like services, which means we need to work with the government authorities, work with the organizations, institutes, and also the citizens in every city. So that's why, by working together, we can build a ecosystem. So it's not just purely a commercial behavior. So that's why we spend quite some time work with the local authorities in every cities, and then trying to by learning from some license in our early cities. So that's why we can build a sustainable public transportations. That's the most license.
Are you finding that Americans use bikes in ways that are different than riders in Chinese cities? The population density is obviously a big thing, right?
Yeah, of course, density is quite different, but the so-called last mile challenge exists in every city. And also, all the cities worldwide, they are experiencing the traffic congestion and also the air pollution. So when people, they have a travel needs roughly 2 or 3 kilometers, bicycle is the convenient, the fast, the cheapest way. So that's why we are so confident to launch Mobike to all the cities worldwide.
And are you finding that people in cities outside of China understand your model, that they welcome it? Because as we discussed in the summer, many US cities already have these kind of established legacy public-private partnerships. So they kind of have skin in the game and are almost competitors to you.
Yeah, bicycle is so universal.
Yeah.
From South Africa to Europe to American, everybody knows this is bicycle. This two-wheel thing is a bicycle. Yeah. They can call it with different languages, and they know how to. 90% of the total population, they know how to ride it. Yeah. Even they do not know how to ride it. They just spend 2 hours or 2 days. They can learn how to ride it.
Right.
So that's pretty. That's kind of the foundation for us to deploy more bikes in all the cities. So I think that's the foundation.
Are you deploying the same kind of bikes overseas that you use in China, or are you sort of varying?
Slightly different.
Slightly different.
So for example, in Washington, we are offering the 3 gear, and in Sydney, we are offering the helmet. We are trying to fully comply with the local law or local rules.
I see. So cities like San Francisco maybe need bikes.
Yeah, some kind of the electronic bikes. And in Holland, and we got some feedback saying the bike we launched is so small given the people.
Oh, the people are so tall.
Right.
So
we are trying to
bigger
learn.
Frames for the bikes.
Right.
And what about helmet rules?
Sorry?
Rules for helmets.
Yeah, we are offering helmet in Sydney.
You're offering helmets in Sydney.
Yeah.
So you're having to sort of vary this case by case. Interesting.
Yeah.
Sam, we talked a little bit about car models and uniformity versus diversity last night, and I was fascinated by your comments about what would be the smartest strategy for how you go about doing car sharing. Can you maybe share with folks here some of those insights, because I was fascinated by that.
Sure, I'll try to recreate that conversation. Yeah, I think when we were chatting yesterday, it was, I think the question I asked was like, why is, for example, a Toyota Camry, one of the best-selling cars in the United States? And I think obviously we have Toyota's investors, also a lot of respect to them, and they build a great car, and I think people think it's a reliable vehicle. But the other reason is it sort of does a little bit of everything that you need. So if you're thinking of buying a car once every 5 to 10 years, you're like, well, I might need it for commuting to work. I might need it for getting groceries. I might need it for going on a trip with the kids, or going skiing or something. And so you try to find the car that does like everything, maybe not any one thing super well, but does a little bit of everything. And I think and then on Getaround, I think if you and then compare that maybe to a Prius, which is probably gonna be a much better commuting car, or an SUV that's gonna be a better car for going into the mountains or going skiing. And interestingly, when you put those cars on Getaround, you put a compact car, and you put an sort of everything sedan, and then an SUV, and maybe a performance car. What you find is that these specialized cars actually outperform the sort of everything sedan, because people are renting the cars for a very specific...
For a specific purpose.
Yeah, specific
So
purpose.
that's really fascinating, and it implies that the evolution of platforms like yours will lead us to actually greater specialization of vehicle designs, right? I mean, if we're shifting away from ownership to being able to just rent whatever car we need for whatever our purpose is, manufacturers have a big incentive to make their cars as unique as they possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, I think that will radically disrupt the innovation cycles that traditional car companies have had for almost 100 years.
But so on the bike sharing model, is there a same dynamic at work there, or is the incentive actually pushing you towards a more standardized bicycle?
Yeah, exactly, because we are offering kind of the rental services, so that's why the bike for rental is quite different with the bike for individual use.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, the durability is most important than
the number one thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you see the wheel of Mobike, it's like the 5 spokes.
Very sturdy.
That one
yeah.
is not that comfortable, but
Yeah.
it's super durable. So
Yeah.
we have deployed millions of that model in the past 1.5 years.
Right.
Only a few of the bikes, I mean, the wheel has been broken. So which means we are lower down the operational cost for the wheels. So that's super important.
So you need these bikes to last for about how long?
3-4 years.
3-4 years?
Yeah.
I see.
That's why you can offer a low price services to consumers.
Wow. Where are you now in terms of market share? I mean, we just had in the news, a couple of weeks ago, that the company that was sort of widely described as the number 3 company went bust, is no more, Blue Go-Go, or as I called it in CEO Daily the other day, Blue Gone Gone now. But do you see that we're going to have a shakeout in the industry very quickly over the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I think the difference between Mobike and other color bags is that
I like the other colored bikes. It's very diplomatic.
Yeah. So the purpose of creating this company is trying to make some kind of the contribution to the society.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose. And that's why the nature of this kind of business is that you need a heavy invest. So for example, we invest more than $1 billion in USD to purchase these millions of bags, and in the meantime to maintain this kind of bags.
Yeah.
But the return from the fare is so low. So
Right.
which means it's going to be a long-term business. I mean, anybody want to make some quick money, and I don't think it's going to be sustainable. So that's why you see right now we are in a good position, because we are thinking the longer term, trying to do something good for the city.
Fascinating. Really, really interesting. Sam, tell us, for Getaround, the next sort of wave in your strategy, where are you headed, and do you have plans to come to China?
We can work together.
So I will say that I obviously can't just disclose our entire strategy here on
Come
stage.
on, just among us.
But as it pertains to China, I think we see it as a very interesting and strategic market, and we're taking a very keen look at it. Actually, I've been here several times in the past several months, just sort of really trying to learn a little bit more about the services and the companies here and how people do business and how the products are built and what the products look like. Because I think in order to actually answer your question about a strategy, you have to get the information and learn before you decide, right? And certainly, I don't think we're naive enough to just be like, okay, we're just gonna come in and just do things the American way. I think it's a question of us looking at it and really trying to understand what this market is about and what is really the opportunity.
So I want to open it up to questions if people have them.
I have one idea.
And yes, would love to work together.
Yeah, I mean, probably can start to working together in the US market, right? We just got one city in Washington, D.C., and you got 14 cities.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the 2 wheels plus 4 wheels is going to be a perfect combination. So just imagine that in the beginning, if you do not have enough density, which means if your user want to use a car from Getaround and then it's 1 kilometer away, he can take a bicycle and then to ride to the car.
So is Mobike already exploring the 4-wheel?
Yeah,
Tell us about that.
We are thinking of that.
You're thinking of it, but you haven't actually tried it.
Probably starting by working with Getaround in the US market.
Well, this was my other question
Great,
to you.
Yeah.
All right, you saw it here first, right?
Deal.
Yeah, you got the contract on his iPad.
The Bloomberg reporter just ran out the door.
Please.
But when you come over here and you spend time in China, I mean, separately from any plans to expand into the China market, are there things that you see here that, for example, Mobike does, and you realize, oh, that's actually a business model feature that's applicable to what we're doing? Are there things that you learn from some of the innovations you see in China?
I definitely think that's the case, and I think it's true for a lot of American companies. For example, messaging as a platform was definitely something that was pioneered here, and you see a lot of the American companies trying to play catch up now. And so even sort of user interfaces is different. There are sort of different paradigms. So we're certainly looking at all that stuff and trying to understand what is transportable. And we fully also believe that mobility is an ecosystem, and that consumers want to be more multimodal. They don't want to just drive a car or or do one type of transportation. They want to actually be able to be able to have all their use cases addressed through the most efficient method and technology. And so the interesting thing about I think about China definitely is there are more mobility platforms here than there really are in the United States.
Right.
And change is happening here, I think, quite a bit quicker.
One of the things we discussed in Aspen was, I remember I had asked you, you have these strategic partners that are, as investors, that are actually financial institutions, and why would that be the case? And we talked about the other kinds of businesses and places where Mobike can find value. One of them being, for example, that when people open a Mobike account, they have a deposit that just sits there, and that's something that could potentially become a financial service. But are you expanding that, or has the regulatory context on that changed at all since we spoke? Do you still see those opportunities there?
Yeah, I think Mobike, this company is going to have unlimited potential for the future growth.
Unlimited potential.
Yeah, I mean, since we got nearly 200 million users in just 10, 20 months, and we got millions of connected bags.
Yeah.
So but right now we are pretty much focused on the connected bags,
right.
Which means we are going to roll out Mobike services to more cities, to more countries, and then once we have this core business, and then we are thinking of to expand to related categories.
Yeah. So you're not doing anything right now in the kind of fintech.
We are testing, but
not on a big scale. Do you have aspirations to sort of go in that direction as well?
I think it's interesting. I think in all mobility, there's sort of like this that comes sort of naturally. So it is something there's so many different tracks we've talked about, but we don't have any necessarily active plans on that. But certainly, I could see that across the spectrum of mobility, most certainly.